Welcome, everyone, to the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. You've got two of your hosts today, myself, Dr. Derek Williams, and Dr. Steve Van de Graaff. Excited to be here with each other and with all of you. How are you doing on this beautiful day, Steve?
I'm doing very well, but I'm just going to ask the question. Are you sunburnt, Derek?
I get that question on pretty much every video call that I have. I play either tennis or golf pretty much every single day, and my hair is pulled back and my forehead takes the brunt. I really need to start wearing a hat. I was playing today and like holding my hand up while I was waiting for the serve to come, and in my head I'm like, why am I not wearing a hat every day? It's kind of stupid. So if I die early of facial skin cancer, it's my own fault.
No, I like it. I think you should own it. Pull the hair back, embrace the sun.
Well,
Looks good.
yeah, I'm doing well at it then. So, Steve and I are really excited. We have talked about doing this. We first talked about this probably 3 or 4 months ago, maybe even more. But Steve and I have both had relatively similar experiences as far as selling our practices and taking a bit of a hiatus with our families. And so we had talked about the idea of interviewing each other and being able to share a little bit more of our experiences and stuff like that. And in preparation for that, we thought that it would be a lot of fun to have an introductory episode where we just talk about the preparation that went into allowing for these types of trips and experiences. So that's what this episode is going to be about. We're going to just talk about what are the things that we focused on that allowed us to have these types of experiences. And then in the following two episodes, we will be interviewing each other to learn more and kind of dive into what the experience was like and some of our takeaways. So, Steve, to get this started, let's kind of go back to college. When you were in college and you were studying for the DAT and you're planning and thinking, okay, I'm pretty sure I want to be a dentist. What did you envision for yourself as far as career, lifestyle, how long you would practice, those types of things?
Why not before college? How about we go back
Okay.
further?
All right. Fine. Go ahead.
No, that's a fun question. It's interesting. I think usually when I talk with dentists, the starting line is dental school. So it's kind of fun to think back before then. But I think I had not a naive, but I did not understand before getting into dental school or graduating from dental school the potential that dentistry had. So for me, I thought dentistry was a sweet gig because you got to make six figures and you didn't have to work on Fridays and you got to help people. So you're kind of like a doctor, but you didn't have to work on Fridays. And I thought, man, I could go camping like every weekend and still make six figures. This is the career for me. So that's kind of what it looked like for me. And then I remember each year, almost through dental school, my belief lid kind of getting raised. I remember one time with you, we were at some meet and greet with I think it was Aspen Dental or maybe Pacific. Anyways, some of these DSOs came in and we went because there was free dinner, of course. And and one of the guys, he was out for 2 years and he's like, man, I'm making 300K. This is incredible. And I remember that just seemed huge. I was like, that's double what I could envision. Anyways, I'm talking about dollar signs, but I didn't really understand the potential of just like real financial freedom until probably like the first year of practice ownership. I guess that's kind of when the wheels got turning seriously for me about financial independence. Would you say is this kind of a similar path for you, or were there high kind of like milestones in your progression where you started understanding more was possible?
Yeah, it's interesting because I asked about college and you said let's go further back than that. And then it made me think about myself and the big the big moment for me was my senior year of high school reading Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Hmm.
And I remember after I read that book, I thought in my mind, I'm going to retire by age 45. And that was a big moment for me because I have for a long time looked at life through ROI, evaluating Where does it make sense for me to put my time and energy and attention? What can I learn from other people? It's benefited me in a lot of ways. Like family has always been big to me because I've listened to a lot of interviews with people that have been very successful financially, and one of their biggest regrets in common is not spending enough time with their kids and their family. So that was like huge for me. Like, okay, this makes sense. I'm going to store that away. But in Rich Dad Poor Dad, he talked about everyone thinks about money and probably talks about money in some aspect pretty much every single day of their lives. But there are very few people that spend any significant amount of time educating themselves, thinking about how they can make money work for them and how they can use it to control and lead to the type of life that they want to have. And that was just the biggest light bulb moment for me. Um, so I decided on dentistry because everything matched up to me. I loved working with my hands. I loved that you could own your own business. Most dentists worked 4 days a week, pretty good income. Technology was always changing. And so there's different things that you could always be learning. So it just seemed like such a good fit for me. So it was early on. Yeah, it was high school when I thought, look, age 45, that's something worthwhile to shoot for.
That's awesome. One question I had for you is, and I don't want to jump forward too much, but you basically finished up about 2.5 years ago and went on your big road trip of the US. One thing that I thought was interesting is you were working, 3 days a week, and that's it, like very little time outside Monday through Wednesday. So you had a pretty phenomenal, basically, lifestyle as it is. And I remember, I believe you were already doing a couple RV trips on these long weekends. What, like, how did you decide that your awesome, 4-day weekends doing these RV trips around Texas wasn't enough and you just wanted to go full time?
Yeah, so it was a number of things. So we first had the idea to do something like this in 2018. And so we had been thinking of it, and well, let's just go that route. Let's talk about kind of building the vision and getting to that point, because I think it'd be good to answer that question, but it will make more sense in context of everything else. So, and I think I've shared this before, but my wife went to a women's conference in Dallas, and she came back and she had listened to a woman speak. And this woman had done something relatively similar with her husband and kids. They lived somewhere in New England, and they were not financially well off, but they decided, hey, how cool to use this time while our kids are young and have this like really cool trip. So they sold almost everything that they owned. They bought a sailboat. I can't remember what it's called, but they went and sailed for a year, and they learned how to do it as a family. And they wrote a book about it. I think it's called Seven at Sea. They had 5 kids.
Hmm.
And so my wife came back and she was like, you would not believe it. I listened to this lady. It's kind of crazy, but really interesting. And I was like, we should read their book. And she was like, she knows kind of like what I get like when I hear about what other people are doing and start thinking, hey, we could do something like that. And so I think she was like a little bit nervous to read the book, but I was like, let's just read it. You know, who knows what will come of it, but let's just read it. And we read it, and it was really interesting, really, really cool to hear about what their experience was like. And here we were in a situation where financially we were much, much better prepared and well suited to do something like that. We knew that we didn't want to sail. And at some point, we discovered that there were families that were living in RVs and traveling full time. So that was around 2018 that we got the idea and started working towards it. In 2020, with COVID, we it kind of set us back. We were thinking that that could be the year or the year after, but with there was so much with having challenges crossing state lines and everything shutting down that we were like, we're just going to wait for this to blow over. We do not want to have all of this be even more complicated. So we did that, and but we decided to get an RV, and so in 2020 we bought our RV as a 45-foot fifth wheel, and we started going and having trips, and that was a lot of fun. And if I had a week off, then that would be like 10 or 11 days. And so we would do that 2 or 3 times a year, where we would go out for extended periods and have a lot of fun. When things started to kind of cool down with COVID, we got to the point where we are like, okay, well, now is looking like it could be a good time. And I told my accountant that I wanted to do this, and he basically said, I, in good conscience, cannot recommend that you do this early, because you have worked hard to create this cash cow, and you really should, the more years that you can use this stock away, the more flexibility you'll have. And
Right.
so I was like, okay, we'll do it. And we stuck it out for one more year. And it was in September of 2022 that I read a post on Mr. Money Mustache that basically said, you probably have more than enough to retire. Stop waiting. And I read this article, and it was like, Mr. Money Mustache is a big FIRE guy, part of that movement of financial independence, retire early. And so when I read that, it just was like, oh my gosh, that's kind of what I've been thinking. Like, the person in the article was saying, oh, well, I was going to retire this year, but just one more year. I'll just work just one more year to give myself a little bit more cushion. And I still remember that day that I read that article. I was kind of like blindsided a little bit. I printed off the article, and I took Jenny out to dinner that night, and we read that article together. It was at a Buffalo Wild Wings, and the wings were not good. But anyway, so we read that article and decided that it was time.
So you printed this off, you kind of gave it to your wife at dinner. Are you saying this is what I want to do? Or tell me about that. Was that coming from you and you're submitting this to her as an idea, or was she kind of on board with this already?
Yeah. So, I mean, it had been a few years of kind of talking about crunching the numbers, talking about the timeline. And so we honestly, like, we almost got to the spot where I was like, you know what? Maybe this is a lot of fun just the way that it is. We get these really fun, cool trips. Maybe I can start to take 2 weeks off at a time at times, and we can take longer trips. So maybe this cash cow is so good that the accountant's right, and it would be stupid. Like, let's just, maybe we just forego this big idea. And when I read this article, it was a slap in the face. And it was like, okay, yep, it's time. So that's what I told her. And when I read in the comments about, in this Mr. Money Mustache article, in the comments, I found two different books that people recommended. I don't remember what the first one was, but I read that one and I wasn't super impressed. The second one was Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. And I had not heard, I mean, you hear a lot of people talk about that book now. I'd never heard anyone talk about it at that point. I read that book, and I got it audio first, and like within the first hour or two, like, I texted my dad. I said, you have to read this book. And he bought it, and he started reading it that day. So we had been talking about it. And then I bought a paperback copy. So I've read the book like 4 times. I told my father in law has read like one book in the last 15 years, and it's Die with Zero, and he is like a Die with Zero missionary. He tells
Wow.
everyone to read that book. So anyway, that is the long answer to how we got to where we were. So that is what built up. And so it is partially developing a vision and playing with it, crunching numbers, evaluating things, and determining when we could do it. But then at some point, it's still hard to pull the trigger. It's like, gosh, are we really going to walk away from this? And I ultimately had to just make the decision that this is such a cool experience that we have the opportunity to take. And we had this window where, my youngest was, 2, 3, 4. My oldest was 10 or 11. And we knew that we wanted our youngest to be old enough, like 4, 5, or 6, to be independent, so that we could go do a trip like this and do a lot of things. But we also didn't want our oldest to be in teenage years and so connected to friends and stuff that it would be so hard. And so when we left, my oldest was 12 and my youngest was 5. And it was kind of this perfect window that we were able to pull the trigger and kind of make it happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the emotional side of it, and I think we can kind of go into the numbers. But before we do that, why don't you just share your side to that question for you? Like, what was? I mean, in my mind, you were super aggressive with maximizing. I mean, you still have the best solo practice numbers probably that I've ever heard for anyone that is doing high volume GP model. Crazy overhead numbers. So it's I'm curious, for you, was it like, almost like, I'm okay, I feel like I'm kind of burning out. I only have X amount of time that I can do this before I like have to do something different. What was it like for you?
Yeah, good question. Well, I mean, first I'll maybe just button up your story there. Interesting that you were just pulling information from other people, from books, podcasts, kind of people you look up to. And it just reminds me, we are the product of the ideas we consume. And so it's really cool that those all kind of distilled for you. And so I think for people listening, it's important to make sure that you're learning and taking in the right information because it completely changed your trajectory. Um,
Yes. Just to add to that, I think that's one of my favorite things about being alive at this time in the history of our civilization and planet. Like, out of the whole time that humans have been in existence, there has been a very short amount of time where you could connect with someone on the other side of the planet that doesn't even know who you are, and you can learn from them. I feel like I really started to discover the power of online networking in undergrad when I was studying for the DAT on studentdoctor.net, and then learning during dental school on Dentaltown, and then Facebook networking groups. And so it's been, if I relied on just the people around me to try and get to raise my vision or to see other opportunities and paths, it just would be so much more limited.
yeah,
So I think a lot of people do that. A lot of people kind of just wait for the information or for a mentor to show up. But the cool thing is, you can almost literally pick, almost anyone in the world that you want to be your mentor, and you can learn so much from them without ever having any type of direct contact with them.
yeah, yeah. So true. I mean, I guess I would say I had a similar experience. I originally went into dentistry just because the work hours and days relative to family time would just seem to beat every other career. And I mean, I think there were some that were more lucrative. Like there were some people in college I remember in econ that were like trying to get into investment banking and like really big dollar stuff. And I was in that major for a while with them, but I settled on dentistry just because it seemed like you could be with your family all the time. I remember one of the investment bankers, he came to a meet and greet in undergrad, and he's like, "Man, it's a super career for money, but I'll be honest, I almost never see my kids. And you guys keep asking about lifestyle balance. Well, you just got to commit to this. And at the end of your life, you'll be able to do anything you want." And that didn't appeal to me. So just the idea of being free to spend time with my kids while they're young was the driving motive through all of it. A couple of things that I think really kind of spurred me towards this vision was at Breakaway. I remember Scott Luna talking about the dual retirement. So he said most people, they work and they put away into their investment fund and they'll have an egg and they'll retire when they're 60. He said that's completely backwards because your kids are all grown up, you're tired, you don't have health. Like, really, if we want to maximize life, we should actually work less in our 30s. And then, if you need to, go back in your 40s and 50s when your time isn't as valuable and put in the hours then. Maybe that's obvious to some people, but that really resonated with me because I was in this mode like, I want to pay off my loans. I want to get a house. I want to take care of my family. But it's like, oh, wait, taking care of your family might be different this decade. It could be you need to spend time with them. And so I had to balance that with my goal to pay off loans and get in a financial state that we would be able to move back to an area where dentistry is cheaper and the opportunities are not as good. So I basically created a plan. I said, my son's going to be a teenager at this age. And this was like 8 years ago, like right when we brought our practice. So in 7 or 8 years, he's going to be a teenager. We want to be done living out here on the East Coast. We ended up just loving it out there, but we want to be done so we can move back, be by family, and not move around during high school. So we got to be done by this year. And then I kind of worked backwards and said, what does the finance need to look like? What do I need to do each year in order to make that happen? How much do I need to produce each month? So part of it was just straight up math, right? And fortunately, dentistry is a sweet gig if you're willing to work hard and really create a productive practice. So that started taking care of itself earlier than I expected. And then another cool thing that was kind of an eye opener for me is I lived in Augusta. So every April, the Masters golf tournament comes in, and basically everyone in Augusta has to leave. So it's like a forced vacation, which is awesome. So every year for these first few years of ownership, we would go on a really cool vacation. We'd rent our house out so it was paid for. We didn't have like this frugal guilt. We're just going to go do an awesome vacation. And so we went on our first cruise that we've ever been on. It was super fun. And each year they got bigger and bigger. And then I think in 2021, we're like, let's just go to Europe for a couple weeks. My wife, she went in college. I just always loved Europe. So we went there for 2 weeks and it was incredible. It was just so awesome exploring new things and then just waking up every morning with the kids. They don't have school. I don't have work. We're just going to explore and be together.
Where did
And
you go on that trip? Where in Europe?
we went to Paris and London. So, pretty, I guess, standard sites, but they were just incredible for us. Very eye opening. So, I mean, Europe itself was fun, but it really opened my eyes to, okay, what if we could just do this all the time? It
Yeah.
was really hard coming back after those 2 weeks and drilling teeth again. Like it was really hard.
Did you say 2021?
2022.
2022.
So I think it was like COVID was kind of ending. We were still, I think we were wearing masks in some places and such, but I would say that experience, so like gradual experiences building up to what looked like complete freedom kind of opened our eyes to it. And then, yeah, the numbers lined up. So we decided, I mean, you want to build a lifestyle practice. You want to be able to work a couple days a week and then do what you want the rest of the week. But it was a rare opportunity to be like, we could just be done and not have to work a couple days a week in dentistry, at least. We got do real estate or other things that you can do from home. And so we just decided to pull the trigger. I smiled at your comment about your CPA because I had a similar experience. My CPA, and then when I was selling my practice, the banker, he was just like, "Are you okay? Like, do you realize like what you're doing and what you're leaving on the table?"
Would a
He's
sane person sell this practice at this point?
yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, "You realize what you're leaving on the table right now, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I actually do." But it was worth it because I just feel like this decade is probably the most valuable. Like you hear all these old people that say, "Oh, just love them while they're little," right? And I guess I just eventually took that to heart. The book you mentioned, Bill Perkins' stuff, very, very motivating. How I think he articulated the vision for me. Instead of having a bucket list, put your decades into buckets, right? What's the value of money when you're older versus now? Almost nothing. I remember he talked about his 40th or his 50th birthday, but he spent like $1 million or something on some massive birthday party for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And he said,
Yeah.
this is just going to be the most phenomenal experience of my life. I'll spend as much money as I want. I'm going to bring everyone that I love to this cool island, and we're going to listen to this band that I love, and they're going to play in person. And I don't care how much it costs. I want that experience. And the more I kind of sided with that mentality, the less valuable my time at the office became. And the finances worked out, but I eventually just came to a decision like, even if they didn't. Even if you had to be super frugal, I think it's just worth it. It's worth it. So I guess that was my mindset, or kind of my growing aspiration to actually do this. And I would say my wife was on the same board. She loves to travel and explore new things. I remember when she went to Europe first, she was like looking up to see if there was reciprocity for American dental license in Ireland. She just wanted to go live there and
Uh-huh.
practice.
Yeah.
So that stuff was kind of just brewing, and eventually the opportunity came and we took it.
Yeah. Dude, the line when you said, "What if our generation providing for our family means more time?" That was I even just when I said it, it gave me the chills.
Yeah.
That's such a cool thought. And it's so interesting because I feel like it, I mean, we were driving a week or two ago. Drove to my grandma's house, and my grandparents live in a like very small home. And one of my kids was like, why are all the old homes just like a little square? And so we started talking about how quality of life, the average home size has dramatically increased over the last 30, 40, 50 years. And, as the wealth in America has grown, it's so interesting to me that our lives are much more like cushy in a way, like
hmm
bigger homes, for the most part, like more conveniences in life and stuff like that. But I am not sure that there is any more freedom as far as time, because
Yeah.
as our it's like it's almost like this box. As the box gets bigger, the space just fills it. So
Yeah.
as your income increases, your expenses just match right along with it. There is not very much thought into, okay, if in a way time equals money, so am I willing to trade some of this to just have more freedom and time? So
Yeah.
I think that is a common denominator between you and I, is recognizing that. But a huge piece of the puzzle is, in order to get to where we did in such a short amount of time, you have to invest aggressively. You have to be committed. Like if you're playing the short game and trying to exit in a short amount of time, you have to invest a significant amount of your income every year. So my question for you is, if you're comfortable sharing, what, not necessarily like numbers wise how much, but just what percentage, like out of your net income, like after taxes and everything, what percentage of that number did you invest into real estate or 401k or index funds, anything that would go towards providing income in the future?
Yeah. Great question. I think I would probably say, I mean, after taxes, probably 75, 80%. And it's interesting because, I mean, you just mentioned it, all this money and having nice things, it doesn't really constitute more freedom. I don't think it necessarily constitutes like happiness either. Like, we had a modest home in Georgia where we were living, and we'd go on, trips you do like a little weekend getaway at least every month, and then like larger trips every other month. Just drove like a normal car. And I guess it's maybe just from my background, but like spending like isn't enjoyable to me. I'd rather invest and just experience, go places, have time. And so it wasn't really hard for me to put that amount away. I mean, I think you're very similar. You guys were very wise with your money, and you invested very heavily too, right?
Yeah, I probably am right along the same number with you. I was thinking 75 to 80%. It is interesting to talk about it now because this is not something that you and I necessarily talked about along the way. I mean, I think we probably did at points, and we kind of influenced each other. But you know, yeah, I feel very much the same. We still had fun trips. When Jenny and I were talking the other day, when I really started making money, we probably went out to eat like 4 or 5 times a week to like sit down restaurants. That's
Yeah.
when I gained a bunch of weight, and it was 2018 when I looked in the mirror and I was like, okay, I'm doing well in other areas of life. I got to focus on something different. Um,
That's funny. You
so
know, I think a lot of dentists, they'll like look at their production and they'll be like, okay, I'm doing great. But it's kind of a fairy tale number, right? Your adjusted production is how much you're collecting. And then what you're taking home is much more important than that. And then you don't think about taxes. And so if you really look at your final number of what you're making, I think that could surprise a lot of dentists. I kind of took it a step further and I looked at it as how much am I going to invest each year, or the amount of money I'm going to invest in each year, how much, assuming a 10% return, am I really making per year in passive income? So if you invest 200K a year or 500 or whatever it is, let's say 200, then each year you're working is worth 20K in perpetuity. And then I just wanted to get that number as big as possible in order to be able to retire in, or not retire, but to be independent after a shorter amount of years. And I think not a lot of people think that way, but if you kind of give yourself an annual investment return on your income instead of just how much money you make, that can help you along in this mindset.
yes, yeah, and this is a great point, and I think something that we can talk about as far as the numbers is, I think, a good starting point. A lot of people listening will kind of think, okay, well, where do I start? How do I figure out, like, what do these numbers even start to look like? And I think the most simple way to do it would be to start by saying, how much would you like to be able to spend per year when you're financially independent? So, like, we can just do this. Let's just say, if you picked 200,000. So let's say you decided you want 200,000, and then we can decide on what percentage return. I usually use like 8%,
Mm-hmm.
but so if we look at that, we would say, okay, 200,000 divided by 8% gets to a number of 2.5 million. So if I wanted to have 200,000 a year, I would need 2.5 million invested and getting an 8% return to be able to get that $200,000. And that's a good start. And then you can work backwards. If you say, okay, well, my timeline is 10 years. Okay, we have 2.5 divided by 10 years. You need to invest approximately 250,000 a year. And that's a very simple way to do it. And there's a lot of things that can go into it, but that's a really good starting point to get you onto a track to be like, kind of like you said at the very beginning, right? Of, okay, if I need this much per year, okay, if I have to invest this much per year, what would my income have to be? What would my production have to be in my practice? What would my overhead have to be? And break this down by month. So you can get very specific on what this needs to look like. And then from there, you can play with the numbers. You can say, well, what if I grow 10% a year? Or, what if my investments are compounding? What could that do for me? So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of play around with that, but getting a starting point. And I think the other most important part than understanding these numbers is getting on the same page with your partner or your spouse. Like, if you can, it is really tough. I mean, obviously, we've all heard a lot of stories of divorce due to financial issues, whether there's not enough income, or there's one person that is trying to save and the other one's just spending. So being on the same page and trying to feel like you can kind of both buy into the same goal and vision is really important. And that doesn't mean that you're working to get your spouse on your timeline and your page. It means you're communicating together, and that may be a compromise of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything you would add to all those, the number crunching part and any of that?
No, I think that's really good. I totally agree. I think it's a really good practice to do that. I think for a lot of dentists, like retirement or freedom down the road, it's just like some nebulous figure, or like when
Yes.
I'm older, or I'll do it when I'm 50. But I think it's, at least for me, it's very motivating to actually write this all out. Like, get the numbers on a page. I want to live off this much. I want to have this debt gone. What is it going to take? How much do I have to earn? And that can be very motivating. I actually just started working with a client. He reached out. And I think he reached out because we lived in Europe for a bit, and he wants to retire and move to Portugal. And he wants to retire in Portugal in the next 10 years, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Like him and his wife, they just something about Portugal. They love it. They love the weather, the sea. They don't love American politics, but it was really fun. We sat down in our first coaching session and we just laid out the numbers. I asked him to send, your net worth statement, all your assets and liabilities. What's your practice doing? Okay, so if we need to get rid of your loans and this is how much it costs to live in Portugal or wherever you're going to end up, what rate of growth do we need in your practice? Okay, so we need to boost your practice 30%. And you need to, like, what are we going to do? And then you pull out the schedule and you find inefficiencies. So, I mean, it's work, but for me, it's very exciting to be able to put those together. And for dentists listening, if you don't have a goal or a date somewhere, you need to make one. It's okay if you miss it, right? But if you're not reaching for it, if you don't know where you're headed, then you're not going to get there. So, yeah, I totally agree. And usually these conversations, like these big picture financial goal conversations, at least for me and my clients, they almost always boil down to not so much like getting, a 12% return instead of 8% return, but it's focusing on the engine that is your practice. Like if you can get 12% return somewhere rather than 8, that's great. But if you can grow your practice 20%, then you'll be able to invest 20,000 more every month, right? And sometimes that's less fun than, investing or trying to get a little single family home over here. But if you're serious about doing it, you need to put your eggs in the best basket, and that's your practice.
Definitely. We're always talking about the lowest hanging fruit. I don't think the point that you said can be overstated because it is so easy to get distracted. Even in your practice, it's easy to get distracted by some sort of technology or CE, like something. And there's definitely times when that can be a good decision. But, yeah, you can do the same thing with like, oh, everybody's talking about real estate. I think if I got in and, I could do this and this. And yes, all of that may be true, but the vast majority of the time in all of those scenarios, people are stepping over dollars to pick up pennies,
Yeah.
essentially. You are not pulling the lever that has the most leverage. And so, yeah, it cannot be overstated that focusing on your practice, evaluating how do I get the schedule better? How do I increase diagnosis? How do I increase case acceptance? How do I evaluate my marketing? Are there any insurances that I should consider dropping? Have I raised my fees? Is
Hmm.
my team bought in? How can I increase our customer service? Like all of those things. I don't know that I've ever seen a practice that couldn't improve in one of those areas that I just listed out that wouldn't make a very significant impact. And those are, like you said, almost always going to have a much stronger impact in the financial health of that dentist versus picking a good stock or home to invest in, things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
What would you say to any dentists that are listening that feel like this may be out of reach? Like, gosh, Derek and Steve did this in, short amount of time. It feels like, they're kind of a one off. How would you respond to someone that is thinking that?
Hmm. It's a great question. Sometimes this is a little bit of a conundrum in my mind. We sometimes talk about getting done and having independence early. And at the same time, I really believe like you can just be happy wherever you're at in any position you are. And so it's almost like this yin and yang. Like, how can you emphasize your happiness and wellness right now in the present while you want to have financial independence in the future? And I don't know if it's a great answer, but I would say yes, it's possible. There are things that make it more possible than others, like choosing the right practice, being willing to practice in an area that has a higher earning potential. And yeah, you can do it. Also, if you don't want to make some of the sacrifices that are sometimes required, you can still have an outstanding life and lifestyle practice working less, like even just a couple days a week, and still enjoy the things that we're talking about and still, helping patients doing dentistry and be just as happy. I know it sounds hypocritical a little bit after reaching a level of independence. But you don't have to be fully free in order to enjoy this type of stuff. You can have a phenomenal life, lots of time with your family and kids, and have strong finances just by building, a lifestyle practice. If you want to hit financial independence and reach for it and you don't get it and you're a few years behind, okay, well, shoot, you're still way ahead of where you would have been otherwise. And it's the kind of the intent and mindset that I think is going to win out rather than the specific dollar amount or a specific date.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. Sounds like if I had to summarize your response is
Please summarize.
yeah, it's basically look, yeah, sure, our experiences kind of line up and match up with what we've gone through and what we did, but that's not the standard. You don't look at us and say, "Oh, that's what I have to reach," or else everyone's so different and unique, and so looking at your own situation is important. You may enjoy dentistry more or less than the next guy. You may enjoy your family more or less than the next guy. There's just a lot of differences. The only thing I wanted to add is freedom is just all in your head.
Yeah.
Freedom does not mean having a certain amount of money. You can feel free when you're in prison. We talk about the idea of the golden handcuffs. There's a lot of this stuff going around, and it doesn't, while all of that is, I'm not trying to discredit that because there is merit to the fact that if you owe money and have a high amount of loans, you have to make money to be able to pay it back. But you can also work and be intentional towards creating a practice that you enjoy working in, getting the right team in place, getting better at procedures, getting better at the way that you communicate, to creating a place where you enjoy going to work so that maybe even if you didn't have to, you may still choose to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think it's more about your direction than it is about your position. It's so easy to be like, oh, that person is that far along. This person's this far along. The person behind me, they haven't got anywhere. It doesn't really ultimately matter. What matters is that we're all just growing in the position where we're at and we're just improving it and making things better. I think if you have that mindset, it doesn't really matter so much where you are or what your age may be, but just the direction you're going.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I feel like we've talked through a lot of really good points. Is there anything else that you think that you would add when it comes to this idea of preparing for an exit? I guess is maybe what we summarize this as.
Um, no, I think that's a lot to chew on there. That was great.
Any thought to add is that, well, I mean, I guess we already kind of shared this. It was harder than I imagined it to be to pull the trigger. Everybody talks about, oh, if I got this X amount, I would walk away immediately. And I think just the way that I was saying that, like, you increase the size of the box and that the space gets filled was somewhat of a similar experience for me, where it was like I started taking steps in action moving towards selling the practice and going this direction. And it was like, whoa, okay, am I really going to do this? Like, I've been focused my whole life on increasing my net worth and like getting to this. And now that I've built the practice, now that I've done all these things, like, am I really just going to walk away so that I can go live in a trailer with my kids? So it's, there's times I just feel like every time you make a significant step into a certain area or a certain direction, there's always going to be a little bit of fear that comes along with it. And I think that's normal. The next step is always unknown. You haven't taken the next step yet. So how can you feel 100% confident in what the outcome is going to be? But I think if you're waiting for that, you're never going to take any sort of action. So it's a constant process of evaluating where you're at, having a vision for what you want to come, and then when you're in a position to take action, that you take input from others, you talk with those closest to you, you make a decision, and you move forward.
Yeah. Very well said. Yeah, it's interesting. The butterflies of selling my practice were eerily similar to the butterflies of buying my practice.
Yes.
In fact, I remember I flew out and it was just a small old office. I remember sitting at the front desk looking at numbers and I was just like sweating. Like, am I going to buy this? Is this for real? Am I going to move here? Am I committing to like a decade here? Fortunately, it wasn't a decade. But then I remember sitting at the front desk, like creating a prospectus to sell my practice. And I was like, I'm in the exact same spot. Am I
Yeah.
really going to do this? And I agree with you. I think it takes faith, but really, faith in the sense of just like bravery to try new things. And I think if you don't have those experiences in your life, like if you don't have a really kind of gut wrenching decision that you have to make or pull the trigger on every so often, maybe you're not expanding yourself enough, or maybe you're missing out on opportunity. Maybe you fail and make a bad choice, but make big choices, kind of go out on a limb. I think that's where the kind of the treasure is at usually.
Agreed. Yeah. Great stuff. Well, thank you for your time. I think a lot of people will be really interested in this conversation because there's a lot of people that are interested in how we've gotten to where we are. Justin had a very similar path and kind of paved the way, and we were able to beat him as far as doing it at a younger age and more aggressively. It's always fun when you can learn from others and then find out how to adapt that best for your situation. So
Yeah. Yeah. Great one,
thank you
Derek.
for thank you for being here. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you in the next couple where Steve and I are interviewing each other on going more into depth into our travels and what that was like. Take care, everybody.
Peace.
Sicker than your average, sicker than your average. Sicker than your average, sicker than your average.